Hello folk, how you doing? Scotty. You've seen previous videos that I've made on healthcare, one of which was in relation to do with American healthcare costs and in relation to do with the solution. Let's just kick off and just go on to Suris' argument.
Let's take a look at Mark Levin and his opinion on why healthcare is not a right.
I watched some of these hearings today and they were disgusting. Bernie Sanders at the HHS confirmation hearing today for Tom Price to be Secretary of the Department of Homeland Health and Human Services. Cut 14, go.
The United States of America is the only major country on earth that does not guarantee health care to all people as a right.
It cannot be a right, because rights are not something that beneficiaries or recipients get as a matter of government dictate.
Yes, they can be, because we literally have an establishment of human rights that are granted that our government dictates are considered human rights. Human rights are whatever we agree as humans human rights are.
He doesn't understand negative rights and positive rights. If you grant rights, it means you are giving people permission over their rights. It means that the state can take those rights away from you any given time. It's called positive rights. That's collectivism. Individualism means that rights are natural to the people. The equal right to agree to disagree with one another. That's real equality. The state does not have the power to take those rights away from you. And the problem with positive rights is you have subordinated the rights of individuals through economic slavery, which is what you live under today. Your rights are so-called granted. It means you're given permission for your freedom, which is basically to say you're not truly free in the first place. Positive rights is not equal because you're subordinating the rights of individuals to disagree with you. So you're placing your so-called rights above the rights of another individual. Now, a prime example of this would be the example to say that a job is a right. So your right to access to healthcare, or your, right to a job, is somehow of greater importance than the right of the employer or the right of the doctor. So with regards to employment, how dare an employer even have the option to consider over employing you? You should have the right to employment, and that individual should never have a right at all. A right would be your natural right to freedom of speech. And you could say, well, I have a right to housing. That's all well said and done, but there's a problem there. What housing? There's all different types of houses. They are individuals who work for a living to earn a wage. Now, they're individuals that should have their own individual rights. Of course, the socialist doesn't see that. They have to force others to provide a service. What duty does the doctor and nurse, or even the teacher, have to serve you? In other words, are they your slave? Who's to say you cannot have affordable healthcare whilst individuals having the ability to pay for their own healthcare, rather than forcing society into a collective group to pay for others? This goes on to the argument on taxation. If the individual did not consent to the income tax, it is theft. And it wouldn't matter how hard you try to say that taxation isn't theft. It is theft. Just because you apply for a job, it doesn't mean to say that since you work in this country, that means you contribute. Because what does contribution mean? To contribute to society, a contribution denotes voluntarism. Where was your voluntary action in the income tax? If you work in the country, you're forced by law. If you do not pay the income tax, you're going to jail. Now, it's their individual right what they should be able to do with their own finances. And since the individual does not have that right, they're economic slaves. They are individuals with their own rights and they make an earning. You don't have a right to their earning as slaves to work for you, because that's essentially what you're saying. On the flip side of that, we are not saying that just because healthcare is not a right, that people should not have access to healthcare. That's where you've jumped the gun and you've went down the road of this American main healthcare market, which is not free market.
And one of the rights that humans have, especially here in the States, is the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Do you know what aids a lot in the pursuit of happiness? Healthcare. Being able to afford survival.
And healthcare should be affordable. You stick the gun to your foot and you pull the trigger, because you somehow seem to think that the American main healthcare market is somehow capitalist. You've basically allowed government to step in and control, to dictate. If it was capitalist, it'd be down to consumers being able to freely shop around and the individual, the consumer, being able to decide who their provider is. And it's a straight transaction between the consumer and provider. You don't have that. You have the third-party payer system. It means that someone else in the background holds a monopoly over cost. You can check out my video on the American healthcare costs for why it got out of control. That's why, again, I made a video on the free market solution. Now, although you don't live in a capitalist system today, although you don't quite live in a free market today, I'm quite surprised that there was something of a free market model that was able to prop up in today's America. Free market model was able to reduce Americans' healthcare costs dramatically.
Unless you want to argue that people don't actually have a right to life.
And because you have other human beings, what are you going to do, enslave them? Force them to service that right?
That every argument he's making right now is against the military. It is against the fire department. It is against the police force. Let's say I catch my house on fire right now. So I take my phone and I call the fire department. And if the dingus on the end of the line of the fire department goes, "What, do you think you're going to enslave us? Do you think you're going to tell us that we need to come save you?" No! Your house is not your right. You don't have a right to our services. What are you going to do? Force us to come help you? If that was the conversation that happened there, then my argument would be, why the fuck do we even have a fire department? If he is staunchly pro-life, then I would argue that he has to be pro-healthcare.
In this argument, it's an illogical fallacy. Nowhere are we saying that you shouldn't have access to the fire department. In fact, even in a free market, if someone cannot afford, there is free service to provide for them. Charitable built hospitals that would provide complete free access for people who cannot afford them, unemployed at the current time or whatever, and it's strong charitable operations within a free market. See, that's the difference. We believe in doing things charitably and through voluntary action. Since we are saying that you do not have a right to those services, that somehow means we are saying that they are not going to serve you, or that the people are not going to be able to afford it. An illogical fallacy. We're saying that you should have access to these services, that they should be cheap, affordable, that they should provide quality service. And like you later mention about that of televisions, etc., it drives the cost down in a free market. That's what happens with the fire service, the police, the security, it's exactly what happens with healthcare. So you're completely wrong in that issue. It does actually become more affordable in a free market, but you're not living under a free market, and that's part of what the problem is.
And this crap about it being a right, ask the vets at the VA if their rights in government-controlled Soviet-style healthcare is being serviced properly. Ask people on any level of government healthcare if they can see their doctors on time, if they can see specialists on time.
This waiting argument all the time. You know what the answer to the waiting argument is? Incentivize people to get an education. Incentivize people to go into the medical field. Wow, it's almost as if the more educated you get, the less conservative you get. What a fucking coincidence.
Actually, Suris, you're not very well educated, because what on earth has it got to do with that of the quantity? Yes, in terms of private sector costs, the quantity of doctors available on the market, in that case, then yes, that does play a very big part in relation to cost. But you think that it's just a case of just training more doctors and nurses, and voila, the shortage problem in the NHS is just going to magically disappear. You completely ignore why the price shortage problem existed in the first place. You completely ignore the fact that with, for example, the British NHS, when they artificially reduced the price and removed the price artificially and set down the so-called free at the point of use, people who were otherwise not really needing the treatment, who had such minor problems, began seeking doctor's appointments for the most silly things. I'm not saying that they shouldn't have access to that of healthcare. These people started rushing out, they started seeking doctor's appointments, taking up doctors' valuable time. Now that's the problem, because when you artificially lower the price, when you artificially remove the price, set it free at the point of use, the demand for healthcare treatment drives through the roof. It's impossible in a 65 million populated country to avoid a shortage problem then, because no matter how many doctors and nurses you've got there in the NHS, it's never going to keep up with 65 million people.
When you have a system, like the private system we have right now, where people can't get help because they can't afford it, it's almost as if you're arguing that waiting to die is better. If you have socialized healthcare, you can functionally create more positions where people can get help.
Well, there's the problem. You don't have this private system because in your American healthcare system, it's overregulated by the state. Now, I don't know whether Donald Trump is taking action in any manner or whether he's deregulated this, but even his deregulation is minute in the grand scale of things if you compare it to the 19th century. And you always hear this about the NHS where they say, oh, the NHS is available for everyone. Really? Is available for everyone. Here's a quote. Age standardised survival rates for the most common types of cancer remain several percentage points below rates achieved in most other developed countries, and such differences translate into thousands of lives lost. For example, if the UK's breast cancer, prostate cancer, lung cancer and bowel cancer patients were treated in the Netherlands rather than on the NHS, more than 9,000 lives would be saved every year. If they were treated in Germany, more than 12,000 lives would be saved, and if they were treated in Belgium, more than 14,000 lives would be saved. A similar picture emerges for a range of other conditions as well as for more holistic measures of health system performance. For example, the UK has one of the highest rates of avoidable deaths in Western Europe. If this rate were cut to levels observed in Belgium, more than 10,000 lives would be saved every year. More than 13,000 lives would be saved if the rate were cut to Dutch levels. I don't think you even begin to understand just how much that blasts you so far out the water. The NHS has left thousands of people in neglect, even before its reforms in the 2000s. It had to be bailed out by the Labour Party even before Margaret Thatcher became the Prime Minister. Record costs of the NHS, drugs, etc., right? And this was back in 1958 in a long waiting list. And 1958 for crying out loud, and it's got the long waiting list. These excuses about the long waiting lines have been going on for decades, right? The problem's never been solved, so don't even bother bringing up the crap about saying about, oh, it would be alright if government was to completely take control of it. Well, there you go.
This is one of those things that the private free market is supposed to be able to fix, but it doesn't. Healthcare is not something that functions best in the private sector. It functions best when you have a private option and a social option.
Now, this is completely false, and I don't understand why someone as hard left as yourself would even accept such a private model to a certain degree. You don't have this private free market model today with the main American healthcare market. But what contradicts your entire narrative is the fact that Americans are getting provided with far better healthcare through that of the direct primary care system. And again, I'm not going to go into it extensively. Go and watch the video on direct primary care, the solution of what I provided, and you'll see it just destroys the basis of the entire argument.
It's almost as if when you create a black and white fallacy, you engage your audience in a way that they can only have black and white thinking. They can only think it's either private or public, and anything in between doesn't exist.
The in between is exactly why you are faced with corporatism. It's exactly why it's inefficient, because you've allowed government to interfere. The in-between that you're speaking about was the quasi-market model that the UK went down the road of after, 2000. I think it was the Labour Party that introduced the private finance initiatives, etc. Now you've got these certain private providers, etc. It's, so this quasi-market model, it's inefficient. It could never rival that of a free market. It's the reason why your private sector costs are so expensive today, because you've got the government involved. That's why there's such inefficiency. It's like if you look at the 19th century with all those private companies that were facing bankruptcy, is because of government's interference through offering subsidies. The reason why your main American healthcare market is so piss poor is because it's not free market. That's why.
Ignoring the amount of people that a capitalistic view on healthcare has actually killed.
What the hell's capitalism got to do with the third-party payer system? I don't know whether that's been recently removed or that, or whether reforms are going to be made. You have seen more and more of these insurance costs driving up, more in, of the intervention and where you have to have insurance for bloody well everything, that's why your costs drove up.
Do you know how long Tabitha Jade has been waiting for an MRI for a potential tumor in their pituitary gland? 10 years. Under private healthcare. You know why? They can't afford it.
But that's a very sad thing, and it's sad that they're not getting access. But that's because it's not free market. That's what happens when you allow government to interfere in the market. Stop blaming the private sector. Stop saying, oh, it's because it's privately run. Privately run with government's hands everywhere in the bloody private sector? If it was left down to the free market, you would not have the third-party payer system, and the competition would then drive the cost down.
It's just so stupid to let the left get away with this stuff all the time.
Major country in Europe does it. Do you?
Every major country in Europe treats it as a right, and every major country in Europe sucks. Their healthcare system sucks.
Really? Does it? Does their healthcare system sucks? Last I checked, America's the land of the free in name only.
I'm not going to go as far as to say that their healthcare systems like in Italy or Spain or whatever, and I don't know these countries, to be perfectly honest with you, so I'm not going to pass comment on that. Comparing those healthcare systems to a free market would beat it hands down. You conceded to the fact that the United States is not free. Exactly.
That healthcare is a right of all Americans, whether they're rich or they're poor, should people, because they are Americans.
Queso with the 5,000, the only guys trying to copy the US is the UK, and the UK just left Europe. Quite telling, isn't it?
How the hell did my country leave Europe? Europe is a continent. We didn't leave the continent. The European Union is not a continent. The European Union is a political union. And I'm sorry to break this to you. Thank fuck we left the EU-SSR. Thank fuck for that. Why? Because the EU-SSR, not an if, not a but, not even a maybe, is heading for a crisis, a serious crisis. One where the euro is going to crash. That means your euro, the paper that you hold, is devaluing to the base value of sweet F all, to nothing. So those people who sit with life savings and living in the European Union right now, they're going to face the consequences. They'll face it when they wake up one day and realise that their entire savings that they worked for devalues to nothing. Then you'll see crisis. And that's when these, the corrupt elite then step in and act as their saviour. Oh, we're the superheroes. We're here to save the day. Yeah, they just basically want to push them towards another Soviet Union. Thank fuck I'm away from it.
Doctors warn over cancer op cancellations amid NHS pressure. In other words, doctors warn that people who need operations because they have cancer can't get them. They're being canceled. Hey, healthcare's a right, don't you know?
Boy, wouldn't it be really awkward if every problem you're pointing out exists with the NHS also exists in our healthcare system, just for different reasons?
Well, yeah, I mean, of course it exists currently within the NHS, and I'm not denying the fact that there's a problem in your main American healthcare market, but again, check out my video, why the American healthcare costs go out of control and why the neglect that you're being faced with. Just like your televisions, your phones, etc., the prices would plummet. Well, anyway, folks, I have covered the basis of his argument with regards to healthcare. I hope this video has been educational enough for yourself. If you've got anything you would like to ask me on that type of stuff, feel free to comment in the comments section below. Be sure to like the video, share the video. Anyway, folk, thank you for watching, and I shall talk to you later. Cheers.